Fence Marketing Profit Podcast. Interviews with $1 million plus fence and gate business owners on how they market and grow their companies in today's economy. Hear directly from the most successful leaders in your business and discover what they're doing to keep their phones ringing, trucks running, and businesses booming. With your host, Scott Andreessen.
Okay, so we're going to get started here in just a moment, folks. I have Zach Peyton with us from Superior Fence and Rail Franchising. How are you doing, Zach?
Good, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I want to thank everyone for coming in and joining us. We're going to kick this off here in just a moment. And Amanda, Chris, Ramsey, Lee, how you folks doing? Good to see you. Other people are joining us. We have some people coming in. Oh, there's Sean. Hello. Some folks joining by phone. That's awesome. So, yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and get the ball rolling. Zach, can you start off by just telling us, you know, a little bit about yourself, how you got into the fencing business?
Yeah. No, and thanks again for having me out, Scott. It's great to be able to, you know, talk about the business without being in the business for a minute. But yeah, no, I'm originally from Texas. I have lived kind of all over the place. I've lived in Texas, Washington, you know, all over the place. Went to high school in Arizona, and then I went to college at the military academy in West Point. Went to school there for 4 years and then served in the Army for 5 years as an intelligence officer in the Army. And then when I got out of the Army, I wanted to come to Florida and get into the construction business because I had a buddy who was out here, you know, who I'd gone to school with. It was like, hey, man, business is booming. This was during the time period of the mid-2000s when, you know, construction was going, you know, too hot. Mm-hmm. And so I came to Florida initially looking for an opportunity, left briefly and then came back. And in early 2009, started Superior Fence and Rail of North Florida from scratch. And then I had 2 partners with me for 3 years. And after 3 years, I bought them out of the business. And then, you know, it was just me, you know, doing the fence business for a couple of years. And then kind of how I ended up where I am today with franchising is whenever my son was born, before he was born, he was diagnosed with a heart defect. And so I had to kind of prepare myself to get out of my business for a period of time so that I could, you know, deal with that issue and be there for him and be there for my wife. So I had this massive effort to basically take all of the information and knowledge out of my head and put it onto paper and delegate that. I hired a really good manager to help me out. And that whole effort was sort of the basis of what's now our franchise manual. So when I came back, thankfully, my son didn't have to have any surgery. His issue kind of miraculously resolved itself on its own without surgery. And so when I came back from that, like the fruits of my labor of delegating everything and documenting everything were showing. Like everything had been clipping along without me and things were going pretty well. And so I kept working on the business and kind of tried to stay out of it as much as I could from that point forward. And towards the end of 2016, Chris Johnson, who owns the trademark and license for Superior Fence and Rail, came to me and said, hey, I think we should start franchising. And we did. And we've opened up 9 offices over the last 2 years, and things are going pretty well with that. So that's, you know, kind of how I ended up here. So
awesome. So, I mean, what really excited me about talking with you and bringing you on is you're a systems guy, right? So franchising, I mean, you're looking at the fence business as a product, so to speak, that all the systems need to be in place. And a key ingredient is providing excellent service. We get that. But how much of a factor is it in running a successful business and scaling? Is it to have your systems in place? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, my like one of my guiding principles is that, this business is built on great people, smart processes, and innovative technology, right? So we've got to have good people in place. And, we can talk about how challenging that is just in and of itself. But once you get good people excited about growing a business with you, you've got to have some predictable, smart processes in place so that it's not just pure chaos, right? And when a lot of things start happening all at once, systems can break down, and there can be a lot of confusion, a lot of mistakes. We have an incredibly complicated business, so I think that having the right systems in place for people to work within is a huge factor in scaling, right?
So let's kind of, if we can drill down on that a bit, like at a high level, tell us, what kind of systems do people need to have in place for their fence business? There's hiring for one. There needs to be a hiring system. Kind of, let's go through some of those if we could.
Right. Yeah. So hiring is definitely one. Like, how do you hire people? How do you recruit them? What do you ask them whenever they say, yeah, I'm interested in working with you, and they submit a resume? What do you screen for? What questions do you ask them? When it comes to marketing, what is your, we have to have systems in place to say, hey, we're going to generate leads, people who are interested. We're going to capture the attention of people who are interested in buying a fence and try to get them to call us, right? Mm-hmm. So what systems do we have in place for that? Once they call us and we get a bunch of people calling at the same time, how do we manage those leads, right, effectively, so that we, call people back in a timely manner and get an appointment set up? How do we manage our appointments? How do we estimate jobs, accurately, so that I don't have to spend, and in a way that I don't have to spend a year or two training somebody in all the nuances of fencing? How can I get somebody spun up relatively quickly with enough knowledge to go out there, with enough knowledge and the right tools to go out and sell jobs profitably, right? Once they sell the jobs, what are the systems that are in place for processing those contracts efficiently, maintaining contact with the customer, the job management tools? What job management tools do you have to make sure that jobs are broken down accurately, ordered accurately, tracked accurately, and then pulled from inventory accurately, so that you can go out and install well? And then all of the training and the training tools that you need, the truck layouts that you need to make sure that your crews, if you have multiple crews, that they're all kind of doing the same thing in the same way. Mm-hmm. So that if you hire a new person on and they ride with this crew leader today, and then somebody doesn't show up and they're riding with this crew leader tomorrow, that they see basically the same process being followed so that they catch on faster. And then managing warranty is sort of the, final piece. Like, what happens when somebody calls you and they have an issue? Hey, my neighbor came and told me that the fence is installed over the property line, or hey, my gate isn't latching properly, or oh, the guys missed a few pickets when they were nailing. Like, what's the process and system for handling those calls?
Got it.
So that you kind of keep people on the golden brick road, right? And they're always happy and saying nice things about you to their friends and family.
Absolutely, that's nice. So,
and you're making money. I mean, I guess that's kind of important, right?
Sure. Now, so at your stage, franchising, there is literally a process and a system for everything spelled out. Mm-hmm. that, I mean, that's truly amazing that everything is just that well defined. What I would like to do, and I think would be very helpful for the folks tuning in, is to break down, if we could, some of these systems based upon where they're at. So let's say we've got the guy, he's got a crew, and maybe they're doing up to the $500,000 mark. You know, so one crew, two crews, they're doing up to $500,000. Those types of systems, I imagine, have got to be quite a bit different from the guy that's doing 5 million with 10 crews, 20 crews.
No, see, that's the beauty of it is you can have a different system when you're doing $500,000 a year in revenue, right? You can do things manually. You don't have 50 orders that you're keeping track of right now, so you don't have to necessarily be as smart as you do when you have 50 orders that you're keeping track of. But if you want to scale up and scale up quickly, you can put the same systems in place at, you know, and I see it, right? I see it every single day with our offices that have just opened. They're doing things the exact same way my office is. The difference is they're just doing it with less people, right? So the responsibilities are concentrated with fewer people, but as they grow, they can just disperse those responsibilities out to more people, right? Like one person can manage the phone calls and the back office, most of that for a company that's doing up to, let's say, $1.5 million in revenue. Well, when they want to keep growing and they want to get to 3 million, well, they just need to hire another office person and split those responsibilities out. But the systems and the processes are the exact same for us. Mm-hmm. But I have, and the reason why, I guess I've had to retool several times as I've grown. And I was interested to see if it was actually going to work when we started doing this, because we only just started doing this, right? So I wasn't sure when we started if somebody could take the same processes and systems that I have and use them when they're small. I felt pretty good that they were going to be able to do that, but I wasn't sure. But now I've seen it several times, and I feel pretty confident that if you have the right systems when you're starting out at $500,000 in revenue, if you put the right systems in place, all they're going to do is enable you to grow.
Awesome.
You know, and you don't have to keep breaking your business apart and putting it back together again, which is, you know, I think one of the things that tends to happen is guys get big, and it's hard to, and it was hard for me to take my business apart and put it back together again and manage change and manage growth. You know, I think with the right systems in place early on, you never have to do that, and you can kind of grow faster.
Absolutely.
With less pain. So
I hear you. So from your experience, because you've been there, done that, why, you know, do we see a lot of fence companies that, you know, they've tried to scale and they keep failing over and over and over?
Well, I mean, first, it's just a complicated business. You know, just aside from, I mean, let's just boil it down a little bit. We have, you know, a pretty complicated process in place for going out, and we have to go see the yard in most cases. Even with a tool like My Fence Salesman, you cannot, under most circumstances, like go and install that job without physically going out there and seeing it, right? So you got to go out there and see it. The lay of the land matters, right? And then there are, I mean, within CFS alone, computer fence software, for those who are not using it, they've done probably a better job than anybody else of kind of, you know, standardizing the parts that are available from all the different manufacturers out there. I don't even have half of the manufacturers, probably not even a quarter of the manufacturers. And I've got 60,000 SKUs in my CFS library, right? That's complicated. That's hard to understand. And with a labor market for installation that kind of falls between skilled and unskilled. We need guys who are more skilled than tree trimmers, but we can't afford, because of the market, to pay guys the same rates that electricians would make, right? Mm-hmm. So we fall in this weird gap between unskilled and skilled workers. And I think a lot of guys feel the pain of that. Like, it's hard to recruit guys who are competent enough to drive your truck, you know, who you would trust, and who can also install fence. So for the folks who make it, you know, past, you know, up to the 7-figure mark, I mean, anybody who's gotten to that point in fencing and hasn't quit or hasn't, you know, had a heart attack or a stroke from the stress, you know, should be pretty damn proud of what they've done, because it's a tough business. You know, there's a lot of ways for money to go out the door, from what I've seen.
Right. We've got a quick question here from Lee. What's up, Lee? He's asking, what type of software do you use that you have that you built your systems around for bidding, scheduling, lead capture, and follow-up, a CRM, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, so for years, I hijacked the G Suite family of products, right? We took and made this, you know, relatively easy to use but fairly complex Google sheet that, you know, allowed our sales reps to accurately estimate jobs. And then we would manage leads and jobs within Google Calendar pretty aggressively. Like, and the nice thing about that was that it was all very, you know, very cheap, because it's like $5 per user per month, and we had this incredible capability. But it wasn't scalable, and it definitely wasn't reportable, right? Like, I had to manually go in and count leads and figure out like what my sales reps close rate was. And it was a very tedious, not scalable, you know, process. So when we thought about the concept of franchising, I had been looking at software for years, and what we decided to do was build out our own custom solution that we, you know, have called Fence 360. And we're about a third of the way into the project right now. And we've, you know, done a pretty good job with lead management. We're going to go from there into contract and estimate management, and then go into job management, and then start spiraling out with capability, you know, from there. So I think we'll probably get a lot of that done within the next year or so. But we went the custom route because what I found I looked at this for years, and I started and stopped with, you know, several different software vendors. What I found was, like, any solution that claimed to be an all-in-one for the fence business fell short in like one or more critical areas, right? Like, it was a good CRM for lead management, but appointment management just wasn't there, right? Maybe it could manage leads and appointments, but it couldn't manage jobs. And so what we were faced with was customizing several off-the-shelf products, paying the price to customize those, and then carry the 5-year cost of ownership. And as we scaled, that cost of ownership was going to get so big, we thought, well, it's probably better if we can just build it out ourselves. And I have a lot of experience with, and I'm very comfortable with technology. So I thought, well, this ought to be relatively easy. And I thought I found a good partner. What should have been a 9-month project is still going on. It's going on 3 years. So commercial real estate, software development are not my core competencies. I can confidently say that today, but we're going down the road with a custom solution. But there are several, and I follow the threads on Facebook. There are several options out there that are good in one area, but you can't use it to manage a customer from cradle to grave. You know, you can't do end-to-end business process management with anything that I have found in the. Got it.
So in terms of a CRM, I mean, it sounds like you used G Suite products for a while, the Google Calendar, maybe Infusionsoft or Keep, something like that for lead management.
Mm-hmm.
Calendly, could Calendly even be used, you think?
Yeah, it's just weird because of the way that you divvy up leads and create calendar availability for multiple sales reps. Like for a spa, right? Or there's all kinds of software out there available for people who are in a brick and mortar establishment and have people coming to them, and they can just open up calendars for availability and then schedule in leads. I just never found something that where we could say divvy our territory up geographically by sales rep and then auto assign leads geographically and then set appointments to the sales rep availability, right? Like that was a big problem for me that I never really found a good solution for. And if there was a solution that had potential, the people that we had to work with to customize it, weren't the right people. And we ended up doing customization within that anyway. So I know that other folks have used, there was a legacy, what I would call a legacy CRM, Goldmine. Is that one? I know a company that leveraged Goldmine, but everything was a hack of a system that's not intended for our industry, that had to be, significantly modified to make it work for our business. So.
Got it.
And I thought that the custom solution was going to take way less time than it has. But
so I want to kind of get back to the systems part of this, and we've got companies that are past 7 figures. They're tuning in. We've got some that are under 7 figures. They're doing 6 figures, working their way up. For each. You mentioned that the systems can pretty much be the same, but within that, their focus needs to be, a little bit different, I would say, in my opinion. So for the guys in the 6-figure range working their way up, what does their core focus need to be at that point?
Well, the hard part is for those guys who are they're basically trying to get out of the day-to-day in some way, shape, or form, or entirely. Like, I was talking to a guy this morning who's doing $200,000 a year in revenue. And a couple of days a week, he goes out and does quotes, and the other couple of days a week, he installs, right? And he's having a hard time getting himself out of that cycle for long enough to say, okay, well, I'm going to get a competent crew that I can trust to install my jobs for me correctly, and then I'm just going to focus on sales. And I didn't ask him directly, but my guess is that he's tried to do that a couple of times already, and it's real easy to get kind of sucked back in if somebody doesn't show up. And so I can imagine it's very difficult to get out of that cycle if you're really, really, really involved, and you're really, really, really critical to the day-to-day success of the business, and you're depending on that entirely, right? Like that's his paycheck, is whether or not Miss Jones gets her fence installed this week. So to the extent that people and really at any level can get themselves out of the day-to-day business and kind of I met a young lieutenant one time when I was in the Army, and she had a great philosophy, and it just kind of like knocked me back because I was like, okay, well, that just makes too much sense. I don't know why I don't think that way. But she said her whole goal as a leader was to make sure that everybody could operate whether she was there or not. And she felt that was like the definition of her success as a leader, is if she built everybody up to be so competent that they could do this without her. And so I think that there's a little bit of an insecurity sometimes, and I've seen this in a couple of different ways, that people don't think that anybody can do it any better than they could, or they're worried that if they let go, it's not going to get done correctly and they're going to lose. So kind of overcoming that insecurity and trying to get yourself out of the day-to-day of the business, I think is, important really at any level, but especially if you're trying to, make it to the next level.
Can you touch upon that? How do they overcome that insecurity?
I mean, ultimately you have to find the right people. Like for me, I went through this when I was I had one solid crew. It took me 6 or 7 months when I got started to find a solid crew that would come to work for me today at the right time of the day. They would show up at my shop, pick up the job, take it out and install it with relatively few issues, and then come back at the end of the day with a check and a sign off, and then show up again tomorrow and do the same thing again. It took me a while to find that point, but to find that crew. But to grow beyond that, I had to personally get involved and install for almost a year and a half. And my goal every day was, I'm going to find the person who can replace me here, because I need to get out of this. I need to get out of this. This is not, this is not good for the business for the long term for me to be out, installing and, trying to work from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day. So I just had to kind of grin and bear it. What I tell my guys is embrace the suck. I had to embrace the suck for a while with the goal of like, hey, I'm going to find the right person to help me grow my business. I say it over and over again. It's like part of my daily affirmation. Like, I attract all the right people to help me grow my business. Like, that's what I want to do. And I'm always looking, like, that's always on my mind. I want to help find people who are interested in helping me grow. So whether they're, tied up with installations or tied up with production or tied up with sales, again, at any level, like, try to slowly but surely get yourself out of that stuff. And sometimes it just takes patience, because you can't wave your magic wand and have the right guy show up.
So, I mean, there's, they need to know the systems. They need to embrace the suck, as you say. And so there's personal growth in there. I think you said it perfectly, that they need to be making those daily affirmations of, I'm going to be finding someone to replace me come hell or high water. This is going to happen. And you got to be patient. It's going to take some time, but it can be done.
Right.
So at 7 figures, things change. Those people have already embraced the suck. They have the mindset, a better grasp on that, of course, and things have changed. Now, where does their focus need to be?
Well, at that point, you probably, when I got to that point, I had, I found myself with the luxury of being able to work a lot on the business that, for usually longer and longer spurts. But, still when you're under, let's say 2 or, even 3 million in revenue, if you get turnover, in multiple areas at the same time, like, hey, you're rolling your sleeves up. Like, there would be periods of time from, 1 to 5 million in revenue where I was out either driving the forklift or covering down on a crew or answering the phones out front or processing contracts or, you name it. I'd load my truck up on Saturdays and go out and punch out warranty and closeout items. I'd drive around all day punching stuff out because we were shorthanded during the week and I couldn't find anybody else to go do it. But in between those times, if you're, focusing on, documenting the business, like taking all that knowledge out of your head that, your staff of, 10 to 20 people are coming to you every day and they're asking you the same questions over and over again. Like, hey, what do I do here? And hey, what do I do here? And you get the same questions over and over and over again. Like, it took me until I absolutely had no choice but to do it, to take all of that information out of my head and put it down on paper and say, okay, guys, You can't ask me questions anymore unless you go and look up the answer first. And then you come to me with a more specific question, not like, hey, what do I do here? But, hey, I went back and looked it up and I just got stuck on this specific step. Those are the questions I love. Like, I don't like it when somebody comes to me with a question of like, hey, I'm just kind of generally confused.
Well,
I'll work through it.
That's huge, because not only are you developing the system, you've got the system in place, they're forced to use the system because
right. That's the logical next step. Like, hey, I took a lot of time to write that down, so please go read what I wrote first before you come to me and ask a question. Like, that's the goal. That's
rule one. And if it doesn't exist in the system, well, now you got the new question and now you put it into the system.
Right. Oh, good job. You found a hole in my document. Because the fence business, like I said, it's complicated. So people are like, well, hey, I did this and I don't know what to do here. And I'm like, okay, yeah, because you figured out the one situation or the one-off where in this case you've got to do this. And then we just think like, do we need to revamp our systems because of a one-off, or do we need to capture that somehow? Like, how do we handle the one-offs? Because it just seems like they're never ending sometimes.
I love how productized your approach is. That like when I hear you talking about the fencing business, it's like Ray Kroc and McDonald's, right? It's those kind of systems is really what it takes to look at the business in that way. I want to touch upon, some frustration that I see voiced time and time again, and that is, hiring labor. And right. It seems that a lot of folks that's like their number one quarrel there is hiring labor. And a lot of them say that it's geographical. That it's just, we don't have good people in our area. The workforce sucks due to where we live. Do you see that true, or is it more of a systems issue?
I think it's more of, I will say that labor is a little bit easier in some markets than others. And the economy has a lot to do with it, right? When there's, essentially a 100% employment rate, it's a lot harder. Like I'm probably like a lot of the folks here. I was running my fence business during the recession. If I posted a job ad and said, hey, it was like a cattle call. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I posted a job ad and literally there would be 30 people in my office the very next day. And a lot of people with good experience who were just, out of work during the recession. So it was, I don't feel like I had any lower turnover at that point in time, but it was certainly easier to get people to come through the door. Some of our offices are experiencing this effect where they can't even get people to reply. Like, they can't get people to even come in and apply. They call them, they qualify them over the phone, schedule an appointment for them to come in, and then they just don't show up. So I'm not going to say that it's geographically, like it does make a difference. But I think what makes a bigger difference, especially when it comes to retention, is the people, and a little bit with recruiting, but it boils down to two things. Like, are you somebody that people want to work for, right? You're the leader of the team as the business owner, especially for smaller companies. I did all of my hiring up to, I don't know, probably the 3 or 4 million mark. I pretty much hired everybody and trained a lot of them. So, do people, when they meet with you, do they want to come and work for you? Are you the type of person that people want to come work for? And that comes, and whether people understand it or not, that comes across in your job ad. These days, in a tight labor market, you have to advertise as if you're advertising your company to a customer. You'll be like, hey, it's great to come work for Superior Fence and Rail. Like, hey, come work with me, Scott. I've got the best marketing company in the world. We focus on fence. It's exciting. It's great. There's great opportunities for growth. You're going to love it here. You've got to sell people on coming to work with you, especially if you're in a tight labor market. Then that people have to want to come work with you over coming to do something else. And And the fact is, this is hard work in the heat. When we're talking about labor, like specifically like install labor, not just the office positions or the sales positions, it's hard work in the heat. So you've got to get people a little bit excited to show up for work. And if you can get those good people to come in, having the right systems in place so that they come in and, the fence boss isn't having a blow up because, one of the sales reps made a mistake that was easily preventable, and they got up to the job and the customer was all pissed off because the fence is going in the wrong place, or it's the wrong type of fence, or the wrong color, or the wrong style. If you have a business that's full of issues, it's hard to kind of recruit people into that environment. But it's a tough problem to solve because it's almost like the cart before the horse. Like, can you get the good people in and then put the good systems in place around them? I think you kind of have to have the systems in place and then recruit good people into that. But you've also got to be a good person that people want to work with.
So they need to know what they're doing, have that system laid out. Where are they advertising for people? What do you recommend there? And then once they got them, how do they keep them? What's that look like as far as bringing them in, training?
Right. Well, as far as recruiting is concerned, any available venue for recruiting people, Indeed, Monster. I don't love the paid advertising for recruiting. What I found is that it gets you just a ton of paid advertising for recruiting gets me a ton of bad resumes. That's been my experience. Although so we tend to post our ads more widely and more consistently. So what a lot of people don't realize is that when you post a job ad, it could be buried within a day, right? By other people who are also looking for qualified people. So you have to, if you're going out fishing for somebody, especially in this economy, and if you're in a tough, geographic area, you got to put a lot of lines out and be patient and keep, recasting, basically reposting your job ads over and over again. And then for retention, I can tell you this, retention in this business, in the installation labor, has got to be, I'd throw it out against any other industry. It's got to be one of the toughest, industries to recruit and retain into. If we can get people to 6 months, we feel pretty confident that they're going to stick around for a long, long time. I mean, we've got great benefits. We've got, health insurance, a very generous health insurance plan, great 401k, good training. Our employees voted us one of the best places to work in Jacksonville 2 years in a row. But up to the 6 month mark, we have like an 70 or 80% turnover rate and installation, like no matter what we do. There's still a high turnover rate. And no matter what we tell people, there's this point at the end of every interview where, we've had a good interview. I kind of put my paper down, push back from the table a little bit and say, okay, here's the deal. This is hard work in the heat. And a lot of people say they can do it and think they can do it, but you really can't. So are you sure that this is for you? And people will swear to me that they're going to be here every day, that they're going to show up. And people that I truly believe think that they can do it will be calling their girlfriend to pick them up off the job site on day one because it is just too hard. So we really try to ramp up our efforts when the weather's cooler, especially here in Florida. Starting somebody in July is really tough, but if we can get somebody in November, December, or January and give them time to get acclimated to working outside in the heat, that helps a lot. But it's just it's not an easy problem to solve. So you got to kind of throw everything at it and try to distinguish yourself from everybody else who's, competing for a tight labor market.
Yeah, got it. So we got a question here from Connor. What's up, Connor? He's asking, what's the end goal for you and your impact on the industry?
I mean, when we first got started Yeah. I mean, that's evolved over the years, but when we first got started with franchising, we didn't know if this was even going to work, right? To my knowledge, there hasn't really ever been a successful fence franchise. There have been several people who have tried it. I know that there are some pretty large scale temp fence operations, but within our particular segment, there's some large scale dog fence, like the electric fences for dogs, but not for what we do, right? Every day, like going to, installing privacy fence. Like, as far as I know, there hasn't been a successful franchise out there yet. So when we got started, it was just a matter of like, hey, is this even going to work? So people would ask me that question, like, what's your goal? I'm like, I don't know. My goal is to see if this works and improve my own business even more along the way. And then kind of go from there. Well, since we've got 9 up and running, the kind of go from there, my goal is to set up 500 fence franchise territories, right? I call it the Fence 500. I think that we can, achieve that goal. That's our long-term, like big ass goal. Like, that's what I want to do, 500 fence franchises. In the short term, we want to get to 30. And then after that, we want to get to 100. And I think that the impact that we're going to have on the industry is just going to be a positive one, because we have, we're not coming out with a low price leader kind of outlet strategy where, we're coming in and like ruining the market, and guys should be concerned like, oh God, Superior's coming to town, I'm going to have to drop my prices. That's not it. We're not a low price leader. I'm not the low price leader in my market. I don't try to be, I don't pretend to be. We go after quality, and most people who have done at least one home improvement project on their house understand that it's probably worth it, to pay a little bit more and get, a quality result. I think Sean, I read a comment from Sean in response to a question that somebody had. He said something that was like worth $1,000, I guarantee you're going to spend more than $1,000 in headaches working with a lower priced competitor. So we're bringing a professional approach to our business and to the industry. And I think that a lot of people kind of want that. So I would hope that, we're going to have a positive impact on the wider industry, as a result of our expansion. And when we go to markets, I think I don't know that we really make a dent in what everybody else is doing. If somebody else is established and has been running a reputable business, I don't know that we're not coming in saying like, hey, we're going to grab 100% of this market. We're just going to come in and, establish ourselves and just be another company in the mix.
Got it. I want to touch on something you just said about the low price leader that, I've heard a lot of fence company owners, they're concerned about that, maybe unlicensed people come in and do it a lot cheaper, and they fear that that's going to eat up their sales. Does it really just come down to salesmanship, that it's better to invest a little more to get what you want than to pay too little and get a bunch of headaches? Is that
I've only ever seen a couple of companies that seem to be tenacious enough to be just consistently terrible and also the low price leader.
What are their names? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, there's some local companies. You can look up local fence companies in Jacksonville. And, but I think what happens is that people who try to come in too cheap realize one way or another that dog won't hunt, like that's not a good long-term strategy. Because of the nature of our business where you take in deposits, you can kind of run a little bit longer than you would otherwise. But eventually I think it catches up to people. Online reputation is so important these days. I don't, and people get dinged up if they aren't delivering. I have not seen many companies that are the low price leader and also have a great reputation and are also consistently doing a great job and are scaling, so it just is unfortunate in our business because those guys can come in and kind of wreak havoc on a neighborhood or a specific part of town for a period of time. But I experience that every single day in Jacksonville. And I think once you get to a certain point, you kind of just overcome it. But it's an easy business for people to get into, right? Like you can buy most of the fence materials that are common in the market at Home Depot or Lowe's. And a lot of wholesalers will sell pretty much to anybody. And, so people can work out of their house and make a dent. But it's hard to scale up and be the low price leader. So what I find is that those guys tend to be isolated and we only run up against them in a certain part of town. And usually their reputation kind of takes care of the sales job for us when we stack it up against ours. And they're like, oh, okay, I see why you guys are a little bit more.
As far as systems in place for customer experience, they're going to be spending 10 grand on a fence, we'll say, or even more for a project. What does that look like? Are you sealing the deal with giving them a gift basket? Just kind of walk me through the exceptional customer experience process.
What's funny is what's truly exceptional these days is actually not, it really just boils down to communicating well, right? Like we'll have people are just really happy if you tell them how long it's going to take. You check in with them every once in a while along the way and remind them that that's when that this was supposed to happen and it did, and that we're still tracking on this date for the installation. And one thing that we're really good at is landing on a date for people. Like if I tell somebody, hey, we're going to come out on September 10th and install your fence. Like, damn it if we don't show up on September 10th, 98% of the time. And we communicate really well with people. I just had a remediation on some mold done at my house. And what was really annoying to me is that nobody would call me when they were on their way to my house, right? Because I've got young kids, like God knows what they're doing. I don't want somebody just showing up at my door. Like I'd like the courtesy of somebody just calling ahead and saying, hey, I'm on my way. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference. So no, I mean, we find that we win people's, we win, the battle with customer satisfaction mainly through good communication. And, and some of that is just managing expectations. Like, hey, when somebody calls in and asks us like how long it is for us to install a fence, we don't tell them it's going to be 1 to 2 weeks, show up at the appointment, say it's going to be 1 to 2 weeks, sell the job, and then tell them, hey, we're going to be out in 4 to 6 weeks. We have a very consistent message about lead time. So by the time we've sold the job and called the customer, they already know how long it's going to take. We're just reinforcing that, giving them an assurance like, hey, these are the steps that we have to take.
And you err on the side of caution, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's 4 to, if we're 3 weeks booked out, we'll tell people 3 to 5 weeks, give ourselves a little buffer. And a lot of the time, the lead time is a little bit out of our control. Most people who call us have not yet gotten their homeowners association approval or their permit. And so we can kind of use that to drive the timeline. And that's beyond our control. I can't control how long it takes a property manager to review somebody's HOA submittal. So that helps before the sale and after the sale. And during the installation, our crews are really good about reviewing the requirement with the customer, stopping to answer questions and be courteous and respectful to the customer when we're there on the job. And then at the end, what people really love is we walk through the installation and check it off with them, and then follow up with another phone call after we're done the next day when they've had time to think about it and say, hey, how did it go? Is there anything we can work on? And some people, even though they signed off and said they were 100% happy, say, you know, I'm really glad you called because I'm really not happy about this. I thought about it. The guys explained it to me, but I'm really not happy. And some people are, really unhappy about something that's relatively minor. And even if it's something big, we just say, okay, well, that's great. We'll come out and see you and we'll look at it and we'll take care of it. So I think that's sort of,
that's a really good system, by the way. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it solves, the pre-install, the post-install, and the button-up call prevent probably 98% of people from calling in and complaining. And actually, if you look at our reviews online, most of our one-star reviews, as few and far between as they are related to something on the sales, like where we missed on the sales. Like, hey, the sales rep missed the appointment and I was really unhappy, or hey, they didn't leave me with a brochure, or I thought I was going to get this and it was just, so a lot of them were sales related. Not many of them were installation related. So
got it. So I want to ask just a few more questions and then we'll leave it up, to the floor, the people, if they want to maybe have a little Q&A, they can ask you some questions too. Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to dive into franchising a little bit and tell us, what kind of companies are a good fit to get into this.
We haven't really talked to a lot of people who are in the industry already about franchising, but so I'm not 100% sure. It could be a guy like the guy I was talking to this morning who's got a $200,000 a year business in a big market, and he wants to go out there and compete and grow. And he just, wants help with the systems, wants, somebody there to support him and, help him get established. We can help somebody like that. Somebody who's at the $1 million mark who wants to own, 10 fence companies, right? I can enable that, right? And what's neat about working with people who have fence industry experience is that they pick things up and execute very well. Because out of our 9 franchises that we've sold, only one ownership group has any fence experience. And they're, one of our best, but they didn't come from outside of, they came from within my organization here in Jacksonville. But they knew that I didn't have to teach them a thing about fence. I just had to show them the right systems, and just have them implement the systems that they were already a part of here in Jacksonville. And they do some things better than we do procedurally, because they have less jobs and they kind of know what they're supposed to be doing. So I'm excited about working with people who have fence experience, because I think I can scale them even faster than I can somebody who doesn't, but I can help anybody, at most levels. A guy who's already doing 5 or 6 million and who's really happy and, doesn't work a whole lot. I mean, what can I do for him? But folks who want to grow, and grow big, we can certainly help,
So where should like a fence company be at if they're already in the industry? Where should they be at in terms of like revenue and systems in place, people?
I mean, I think that I would say somebody, between 250 and 1.5 million, depending on their market and where they're at. I mean, you can be in a really small market doing 1.5 million. And that's great. I don't know how much bigger we can make you in that market, but if you want to use that, if you want to scale out and open up multiple offices and you don't know how to do that, we can certainly help with that. And, what from the limited conversations that we have had, I know that people, even if they've only been in business for a couple of years, are already very proud of the brand that they've built. So I think that's the most difficult thing for people to come to grips with is like, hey, I've built up my company under this name. I love it. That's the one thing that we can't offer is a system where they can kind of keep their name and utilize all of our systems. But beyond that, if somebody's willing to kind of take the leap, I think that we can help a lot for a lot of folks out there.
So is it more where, like, if someone's interested in franchising, is it more of a revenue share kind of a situation, or more where they need capital to invest in this franchising model? And can you touch on that?
It's a really low capital requirement, especially if you're already in the business. The capital requirement is really low. But our systems are better supported by a brick and mortar operation. So if you're working out of your house and you want to join the team and stay working out of your house, we would have to get really creative and would prefer not to. But it's not an incredibly capital intensive requirement. It's more of a commitment to, like, hey, I'm gonna tear my business apart and put it back together again. If they've already got some systems in place and they want to replace those systems with ones that are going to help them scale, that's good because they're already used to the systems. But I don't think it's necessarily a capital requirement per se. It's more of just sometimes it's just a leap of faith to say, like, oh, okay, well, the more that we do, the better. The easier it'll get to show examples of, like, where we've done it and where we've been successful. So
got it. Yeah. Well, what types of trends do you see occurring right now in the industry?
I think that just in general, I think I see a lot of people who are trying to use software, in a better way to manage their business. I've talked to a lot of different fence companies who are working on some sort of software solution to, because there's a gap out there. Like, if you're in the pest control industry, there is an industry standard software solution that you use to manage your business, and it will manage a customer from end to end. But in fencing, that doesn't exist. So I have seen a lot of people, especially in the last 5 years, I'd say, working on that. My Fence Salesman popped up in the last 5 years. Fence Sense was a company here out of Jacksonville that popped up and then went away. Even the folks at Software Design Associates deployed, their GeoDraw capability in the last couple of years. Manufacturers are getting involved, trying to, like Merchants Metals has a fence estimator tool. That happened in the last 5 years. So I've seen a lot of, technology kind of come into play in the last couple of years. And and the economy is good. So it's the labor market just keeps getting tighter and tighter. That's a trend pretty much everywhere. Like, people see fences going up all around them. They get calls for it, but they can't meet that demand because of, the tight labor market. So.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to, does anyone have any questions out there? I want to give you an opportunity to send in a question. You can type it into the chat box below. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask, now would be a time to do that. And then what I would also like to do, Zach, is if people want to get in touch with you, they can go ahead and send you an email. Would that be all right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's go ahead and share your email. And in this way, they should be able to see that. Zach.Peyton@fencingjacksonville.com. And this was really awesome. I enjoyed our conversation, and if no one has any other questions, then I think we got a lot of ground covered for sure. This was amazing. So thank you so much. And folks, thank you for, maybe we do have a question. Hold up. Oh, Sean said good job. So you got a kudos from Sean. And, Lee, by the way, said that he appreciated your feedback too earlier. So yeah, this was really great. So
yeah, and for anybody who watches this later, they can message me I'm on Facebook. They can message me on Facebook, send me an email. I'm pretty available. So I'm happy to field any questions. So.
Most definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and all you folks that are watching this and attending, thank you for your valuable time too. And on that note, I guess we'll go ahead and come to a close.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. Thank you. Take care. Bye, guys.